What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Redbeard's Garage. On today's episode, we're going to be tearing apart the new Predator Max Performance 459 engine, and we're going to see what flywheel fits it, if we have a rod that'll fit it, what the cam journal size is, all that stuff, so we can make sure to guide you guys on the right parts for this. We're pretty much going to be disassembling this whole entire block, and this is what sucks, what you guys don't see behind the scenes. Normally I do this on a new engine and I don't film it, so I figured I would go ahead and film it to make sure that I can show you guys the processes of finding out what flywheel and stuff works. Another thing that sucks that you guys don't see is normally, like if I tear these things down, I'll build them right back up and I don't torque nothing down to spec, because we're going to be doing a full engine build video where we're doing the same thing, but we're filming it in depth. So I'm basically going to have to tear this engine down, put it back together just to tear it down and put it back together again. But oh, boo-hoo for me, right? So we'll throw you on a tripod, we'll get this thing disassembled. We're going to make sure like the carburetor stuff fits. Someone mentioned that the exhaust port was different on this. Someone was saying that the flywheels aren't normal. So we're going to see if there's any aftermarket parts that will fit this engine, and if so, we can start our parts list and do the build out on it. Alrighty, so we'll start off with the air box. We've already seen the valve train, of course, shown on screen. It looks just like a 212 Hemi that's just blown up on a bigger scale. So let's get this air box taken off. Should be a cap. And then we're gonna have this little clamp up here. So there's always a 10 mil right here in this upper box that bolts to the throttle bracket. So we're gonna take take the three 10 mils out. There's two on the front, one on top, then we can slide this box off. So I did check the carburetor. This is a gasket off of like a 440 or a 420, and it does seem to fit it good. I've centered it on there. So it looks like maybe you might have to modify like an air filter adapter. This is an old school adapter I've had forever. But it does look like it'll fit, but you're gonna have to work it on there. But fits great. So definitely it's got the same port and stuff as a big block. It's just, this is a little tight fit, but it works perfectly fine. Got a different exhaust port. I've never started this engine, so this flange, you can see it's got a wider bolt pattern, which is actually nice, because I always hate when you weld up an exhaust and you can't fit it. So this looks like it's actually going to take the same exhaust port as like a 625 single cylinder. So I'm going to let Go Power Sports know about this so they can make a new exhaust flange, because they sell these little weld on exhaust flanges so you can build your own exhaust. And this is normal one that fits a big block. So the head port is quite a bit bigger. This is like a 625. Like I said, head port. You could use 1 1/4 exhaust and it would be perfect. It looks like it's going to flow 1 1/4 would be about right on it. So someone, I got the comment on screen, notified me that this is not a drain, this is actually an oil filter, which is awesome, and I didn't know that. So I pulled it out this morning, and he was indeed correct. You would think I'd have pulled that out, I just assumed. But when we pull it out, you can see it's a cleanable filter. That is awesome that Harbor Freight did that. So it does have a filtered and pressurized oil system. One thing we're going to do is see about being able to hook up a cooler to it. And also, if we ever did, I don't like running turbos on single cylinders, but if we ever did, this would be a perfect spot to put a T and run the oil to our turbo and then drain the turbo back down into the block somewhere. So that's awesome. We will play with the turbo on this engine, and I have a supercharger ordered because I like supercharging these more than turboing it, because a single cylinder really don't make enough exhaust pressure to really spool up a turbo properly, in my opinion. But I guess we need to go ahead and pull the head. It always sucks pulling apart a new engine. Looks like your normal big block style carburetor. A few little changes, but overall same thing. So factory you could port this up to port match. This side has a lip on it, so you could clean that up and gain a little bit more flow out of your carb. I'm gonna unplug everything that goes with the key switch. It does have charging coils. People was asking if it did, and it does indeed. And it looks like it's a single charging coil. Just unplugging this whole harness so we can get it off there. Looks like the starter's completely different, so you're not going to be able to use the same starter and stuff off of a 420. There we go. We're going to go ahead and pull the coil and set it aside. Now we should be able to get this throttle bracket out. Oh, okay, so it has another bolt here. That's why we can get it out. Alright. So throttle bracket's completely different as well. Now we should be able to pull the gas tank. Alright, so you can see the gas tank mounts are super thick steel. This is like 3/16 thick. So I don't know if an engine plate is going to work on it. We'll try that here in just a little bit, and if I have one, that is. And we can set the coil up there, just get it out of our way. A little bit beefier fan than a normal one. Get right in between the head there. People always say that's the wrong way to take a flywheel off. Not here, it ain't. It's always worked and it don't hurt anything. So the flywheel does look bigger. So let's test it against another one. So here's the billet flywheel. We're looking at like a 1/4 inch difference in overall size, but that may not matter because we may have enough coil drop to be able to run this, and we'd have a lighter flywheel, which would help it rev a little bit better. Of course, the bigger and heavier the flywheel, the better it's going to be about bogging. But you know, as we can see, I mean, there's some machining processes that probably should have been done. Like this one only has one magnet, where most flywheels would have two. I don't know why they chose to do that. I mean, you're normally only using one, so that's interesting. I'm real curious. This is not the way you test a flywheel, of course, but it is a downer. It's not going to take a standard flywheel, so no billet flywheels for this at this moment, unless maybe there's a different variant that'll work on it. But as of right now, this is a completely different flywheel. All right, so this is the reason we want to break this thing apart. This block is a ton stronger than a factory block. Look at all that webbing and extra bracing. So on a standard big block, this isn't all casted. It's got a full casted ear around here. This is the same sheet metal plate that would be on a normal block, but they've added a ton of webbing as well as up here on the block. This is all strength, and you can see it goes all the way around. So highly recommend in block strength. This is going to do tenfold of what the 420s do. So far that's awesome. This taper is huge. I'm hoping there's a V-twin flywheel that's going to match that taper. I don't have any. I think I have one for a Briggs. We can try, but then you're worried about, is the timing the same? So this is going to be a part for a manufacturer to really get. The intake ports are the same, so we don't have to worry about that. Mikuni will fit. Exhaust port, so this is so far. Exhaust port is a little bit wider bolt pattern, and you can run 1 1/4 or maybe even 1 1/2 inch exhaust on this, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, just want to note, so far flywheels will not work, exhaust will not work, but the block is super strong. So that is awesome to note. It's all new, everything on this. So now let's pull the head off. I'm really curious to see if it's got a flat top piston in it. We're going to pull the head off, get it top dead center, and then we'll pull the crankcase open and pull that rod out. Like I said, valve cover is super nice. Looks like it has good clearance for aftermarket valves you could put in it. So that's pretty cool. Got some super beefy shaft rockers. And turn around and get it at top dead center. Okay, they're running a compression stroke. So it looks like so I am going to have to pull the rockers to get the lower head bolts out, which the rockers, pretty cool. You got this 10 mil right here in the center of them. Then when we pull it out, this pin is going to slide out. Let me zoom you in. And our rockers slide out. We have our rocker pin. So there we go. And this bolt just goes through the center and threads into this pin. Pretty cool setup. And it looks like these are the same exact push rods that a 670 would have. They're aluminum, super lightweight. Would I trust them for strength? Like not in high RPMs, I wouldn't trust these. Definitely would go with some chrome ollie cut the link push rods. But so I'm wondering if this engine's made in the same factory as the 670s, because that's what it's kind of reminded me of. And you do have lash caps on both rockers, so don't lose those. Yeah, I'm gonna take this lower metal off. Another short one. This like locks in to the webbing of the block. Hope our head gasket doesn't rip. I'm gonna bet it's gonna, especially the way it just felt. So I'm probably be getting some spare parts for it. Ooh, flat top piston, and our head gasket is not going to be reusable because of, you can see where it tore it, which that happens a lot. Is a hemispheric head. So when we say hemi, this is what we mean. This dome shape, this hemispheric shape in the cylinder head. That's what a hemi means. And a lot of people don't understand what a hemi and a non-hemi is. So this is a hemi head. Dodge was big about using it back in the day. But yeah, hemispheric head is what hemi means. Yeah, so there's the head. Some good sized valves in there. So we're gonna go millimeters. 38 millimeter intake valve. So our intake valve is 38 millimeters and our exhaust is 34 millimeters. So 34 and 38. Let's check just a standard 460, 420 head. Okay, so this is a old Vegas Carts 460 head. You can see it's not the hemispheric shape. It's kind of like a wedge shape combustion chamber. That's the difference between the Hemi. Who's at 38 on the other one. So the 460 has a 2 millimeter bigger intake valve. This one's reading 36 and 32. So 2 millimeter bigger intake, and then we got 2 millimeter bigger exhaust. You got 2 millimeter bigger valves overall on both intake and exhaust on this new engine, which is a significant difference. It's like you put big valves into this head. So far everything is looking better about this engine. We have a flat top piston, where if we was building a 440, so this is the old Vegas Carts flat top piston. It's actually smaller than this. Is it? Yep, it's a smaller piston. This is the Vegas Carts old flat top piston. This one's going to be a little bigger, but on a standard, 440, 420, you're going to have this dome style piston. So what Vegas Carts did back in the day was sold a 100 thousandths longer rod, and you can machine this this dome off of this piston to make it a flat top and get more compression and higher lift out of it. But this is your standard piston that's in like a 440 Duramax, stuff like that. So we do have an upgraded flat top piston. So far, I mean, the money is definitely worth it, but it's how long is it going to take the aftermarket to catch up with this new engine. People always wonder how I keep up with all this stuff, like where bolts go and stuff. I've taken so many of these apart, it's ridiculous. There's our side cover we showed on the last video. We have a oil pump. Don't get discouraged by the plastic gear. I actually think that's a good thing, because if your fuel pump or your oil pump seized up, think of the damage it could do. Instead, it would break this gear. You just pull that pin, or replace your oil pump. And so that's pretty sweet that it's a plastic gear, in my opinion. Other people will argue with that, but not your boy. So we're going to set this aside in a minute. We're going to make sure that our cam journal is the same size, cam is the same width, stuff like that. But right now we're going to go ahead and disassemble it. So our balance shaft, I'm going to pull it out. And it's cool how they put a little window in it to lighten it up. I don't know if that's for balancing this balance shaft or not, but that's your standard balance shaft. And as I said before, if you're not getting your rotating assembly balance, do not remove this. Oh, well, you can, but you're going to get more vibrations, which is going to get less horsepower. So I recommend leaving this until you're really building it and you send your crankshaft off to be balanced. There's our cam. Looks like some pretty aggressive lift on it from factory. Don't know if you guys can see that. Go ahead and pull out our followers, lifters, whatever you want to call them. Everybody's different. Next, we can unbolt the rod, and the rod looks to be extremely low profile. The rod cap is really low profile, so that's really interesting to see. So you can see the profile of that is super thin. Like the amount of meat you have is really thin. So I would be cautious with revving this high right out of the box, especially with the flywheel. Your flywheel and rod is your most dangerous part. The rod's not dangerous to you, it's just going to blow up your engine if it breaks or seizes. The flywheel is what's dangerous to your person. Like if that thing flew apart, it'd be super dangerous. So let's turn this thing to the side. Oh, we're going to have to pull off this gasket, which sucks because it's going to rip it even more. We're going to put this gasket back on it, but we're not going to run the engine with this gasket, of course. All right, and there we go. So flat top piston, really nice setup. The rest of the rod looks the same, so now we can check the length of this rod. We can check the wrist pin size. We can check the cam journal size to make sure. We're going to see if we have a rod sitting on the shelf that will fit this. Use a flathead, small flathead, to get up behind that pin. Got that wrist pin clip out. Now we can slide the wrist pin out. And there's our rod and piston off there. So now we can see if it's the same. So this is the new one. Look how much longer a 440 Duramax wrist pin is. So the piston is like a lightweight style piston. So if we look at a piston side by side with it, you can see the meat difference between these two. So this one's a lighter weight piston. Wrist pin's a lot smaller, and I'm just going to try to put this, oh yeah, same wrist pin size. I can about guarantee it. We're going to caliper it, but that fit really snugly. So that means wrist pin is going to be the same wrist pin size. It's just the length overall. This is the 459. This is like a Duramax, a 460, a 420 Predator. It's longer, but it's the same size. We're going to check in millimeters. So basically 19.9 is what it's reading. 19.9. So exact same wrist pin size. Yeah, we're going to pull the crank out real quick. There we have our crank. Yeah, so this is reading 36 millimeter crankshaft journal. All right, so this is the stock cam out of the engine. This is a 308 cam from Go Power Sports, and the journals do match. That's 15.87, and that's 15.87. And I have already checked the opposite side. So looks like the cams are going to be the same. I've even measured the length of them. You know, normally that's not the case. The lengths aren't the problem, but journal size is right. So that means we can put a GX390 420 cam in this. The rod, so both the wrist pin and the crankshaft journal size is the same as a normal engine. So now we just need to find out the length that the rod needs to be, the stroke, and then we can figure out what rod fits this engine. So it looks like so far the only downside is going to be the fact that you can't put a flywheel in it. But hopefully we can get that resolved. Maybe there's a flywheel for a V-twin or something we can slap on it, because it does have a massive taper on the crankshaft. So we'll keep digging, players. All right, so looking at this a little closer, you can see the piston is like wedge shaped, and if we lay it beside, this is a stock length GX390 420 rod right here. So basically this is not going to fit in there because of the wedge shape. So also what we found out is this is a super short rod. Like if we lay it, we can take like this long wrist pin to line them up, slide it in there because it is the same wrist pin size. Just to eyeball it, you can see the length difference. So this is a super short rod. So I'm going to send this off to have basically a new rod made for it, a billet one. And I don't know what they'll do about this taper. I'm assuming they can just taper the billet one to match it so we can use the stock piston, because the stock piston is actually a really sick design, super lightweight. It's really exciting. So this is the 308 cam sitting in there. So what I have noticed is the factory cam, if we look at it right here, has hardly no step up past that journal, where the aftermarket ones have a pretty big step up. If you can see like a spacer on there. So it's going to be interesting to see. As of right now, I don't want to say the cams will fit until I torque the side cover down and make sure that we don't have an issue with how this has that step up. It could be a possible thing where a custom cam needs to be made for it. We don't know yet. This is the problem with a new engine, just finding out everything that works for it. This is exciting though, because we're getting a custom rod made to be able to test out, and if it works, then we'll have a rod on the market for it. Then we need to find out the cam situation, which I'm going to go ahead and torque the side cover on real quick with this aftermarket cam, just to see if stuff, you know, I can look down the piston hole, make sure stuff is like lining up. The only thing I think is going to hold the side cover from seating all the way. That would be the only scary thing. All right, so we torqued down the side cover to 18 foot-pounds. That should be around what it should be. And we have no clearance problem with the cam. We do seem like we need a thin shim on the cam, because it does have a little side-by-side movement. I'll try to let you guys hear it. When I reach down, you can hear me moving it side by side, but that's a good thing because at least it fits. So what this is telling me is we're perfectly fine to run a standard GX390 cam in this engine. So that's awesome. This is the 308 cam, and with a rod not in it, we don't have any clearance problems. I've moved the cam to one side, rotated over, moved it to the opposite side. So that's huge news. We don't have to worry about any kind of problems with clearance of the cam. So I'm going to say the cam is going to work. You may have to do some clearance with the rod in it. That's a thing to find out later once we get our billet rod, because I thought this was going to be a long stroke. So I had a stock length rod. This is the 41 thousandths bigger, and that's the 100 thousandths bigger. I thought I was going to have to use the Vegas Karts 100 thousandths longer rod, but it wasn't the case. That's all the testing we can really do. So we know flywheels don't fit. We know it has 2 millimeter bigger valves in the head. We know it has a super lightweight piston with the thin, real short wrist pin. We know the rod is a wedge shaped rod. This is kind of like the 625. I'm almost positive this engine is made in the same factory as the Vegas Kart 625. I'm almost certain of it. Because of this rod shape, some casting things I've seen in the block, it seems like it's a baby version of the 625. My thoughts about this engine is I absolutely love it. I'm super pumped about the future for this engine, because the way they're doing the whole stroke with the crank, with the short rod, the ultra lightweight piston, I think this thing is going to be a game changer in the go-kart world. I know a lot of people now are slapping motorcycle engines and stuff, but guys like me love to play on these engines and see what we can make them do that they wouldn't intended on doing. That's the excitement in the whole go-kart world. for me, is doing stuff that no one else has done. That's why we supercharged the 670 instead of putting a crotch rocket engine on it. I wanted to do what hasn't been done because there's fun in that, and learning and failing and, you know, building it back up. But final thoughts on this engine: I absolutely loved it. I'm pumped for the future of it. I think it has a crazy amount of headroom in it for performance gains. I think we can get over 40 horsepower out of this engine. With the stuff I'm seeing, with it having the oil splash lubricant as well as pressurized and filtered oil, is going to be massive on your money spent, because that's a longevity. You're going to know that go-kart engine is going to last you even further if you build a small buggy for this engine or whatever the case may be. So recap on the differences: there is no flywheel at this point in time that I know that'll fit. I'm going to see about getting a few V-twin flywheels, and we'll put some paint on the flywheel, turn them on, and see if we can get one that matches the taper, and then we'll go down that road as we can find flywheels and stuff. So no billet flywheel as of right now. It has 2 millimeter bigger intake and exhaust valves, which is massive. That's a huge gain. The exhaust port is bigger than a factory one, so that means it's going to flow a ton more. We have those really nice valve trains set up in it. It does need stronger push rods, which all these engines do. That's no surprise. The block casting is super well done. I mean, it is a crazy strong block, and we're pumped about that. And of course, the biggest thing is the rod. We have a rod getting made for it. It's going to take us a few weeks to get it back and be able to play with it, but hopefully by then we also have the taper of the flywheel figured out and we can get that done. So let us know what you want to see done to this engine. We're going to do an all-out build. We're going to do some head porting. We're going to see how much, if we can mill the head. It just depends on the valve to piston clearance that we have. We're going to go through all that in a video coming up. So let me know what you thought about this video, this style. I hope you guys like it. We have linked every part we know that will work right out of the box on this engine. So make sure to check those out, because they do help us continue to do these videos. Holler at your boys at Go Power Sports. Tell them Redbeard sent you. It does help us continue to do these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching. We love you, and God bless.